Tom was working on some new test data. It was boring and tiring, but it was the core of all the work he and his team had put in on the test vehicle for the past month. So, like it or not, he was organizing and analyzing the info. His phone chimed, notifying him of a new text. He glanced at the screen but didn't pay attention to who sent it. It took him several minutes to find a break in the data and look up from the monitor. He picked up his phone and checked the notification. It was from an unknown number, not saved in his contacts. The area code was local, but he didn't recognize it. He was about to delete it as spam, but decided to open it and see if it was from someone on the team whose number he hadn't saved yet. He tapped on the text and the message appeared on his screen. At first, he was confused. Who would send him an inappropriate image? He read the text message, "Take a closer look. You still have time. Bradley's, 6 p.m. He read it again. He wondered for a moment, then chuckled softly. It's not every day you get a wrong number about a mysterious cat, and he was ready to delete it when he took another glance at the image and froze. He didn't notice it initially. His focus was on the cat's drool, but now he saw it. On the cat's left leg, hidden in the fur near its paw, was a small mole. It belonged to Tanya, his wife of the past 6 years. He looked again, in disbelief, desperately searching for something to prove what he was seeing wrong. But the more he looked, the more he became convinced that it was indeed his wife's cat. He read the note again. Bradley's was a local cafe, a place he and Tanya had never been to. It was in the neighboring town, but why Bradley's at 6 p.m.? Tanya was supposed to be on her way to Boston. Her team was preparing for a big presentation. The pitch was scheduled for Monday, and the whole team was flying in today to finalize everything. Tanya, being one of the principals, had to be there to prepare. It was already 5:15 p.m. She was meant to land in Boston at 4:30. Normally she would call when she arrived, but it was reasonable to assume she was caught up in getting the team and their equipment together for the hotel. He thought about calling her but decided to reply to the text first. He didn't want to be too confrontational, just wanted some answers. Who is this? How did you get this picture? Should I meet you at Bradley's? He started packing up for the day. He made up his mind to go to Bradley's. He needed to find out the truth one way or another. He texted Tanya, "How was the flight?" "I'm going out for some food. Call me when you're free." He wanted to keep things calm and get a sense of what was going on. He was walking towards his car when his phone chimed again. He assumed it was Tanya and checked his phone. It was a response from the mystery texter. "But I'm sure you'll find someone more interesting than me at Bradley's." His head was spinning. He opened the map on his phone and quickly made his way to his car. Bradley's was 30 minutes away, and it was already 5:40. He would arrive shortly after 6 p.m. He wasn't sure how crucial timing was, but he decided to go straight there and hope to find whoever the texter was referring to as more interesting. During the ride, his phone chimed once again. This time it was Tanya. "Chaotic time with the team. We'll call you later before bed. Love you." He didn't think much of it. Their conversation could wait. He was more focused on his meeting at Bradley's and how the texter knew such details about his wife. His heart raced as he pulled into the parking lot at 6:12. The texter never mentioned who he was looking for, so Tom assumed that whoever wanted to meet him here knew him and would approach him. But it was the mention of someone more interesting being present that raised his concern. The texter clearly knew something he didn't, and he felt like he was walking into a trap, but he couldn't think of another way to get to the bottom of this. It was the picture that made his stomach churn. He trusted Tanya completely, and their relationship was great, or so he thought. But there was only one way someone could possess a picture of his wife's cat, and he was going to find out in about 5 minutes. The finality of the answer terrified him. He entered the cafe and let his eyes adjust to the dim lighting. Unfamiliar with the layout, he paused by the entrance to observe his surroundings. There was a spacious dining area in front and a bar to his left. He made his way towards the bar and found a seat near the end, then sat down. The bartender had just finished serving a well-dressed customer and approached Tom to take his order. He asked for a drink and glanced at the dining area. His gaze focused on a man who had just taken his drink from the bartender and was walking towards a table filled with smiling people. Then he noticed what the texter had hinted at Tanya sitting at the table, accepting a drink from the well-dressed man, dressed to impress in her little black dress and pearl necklace. He acted on instinct. He stood up and approached the table where Tanya was seated. He was 2 steps away when she spotted him. Her smile transformed into a look of fear. He didn't slow down. When he reached the table, he grabbed a napkin from the table and placed it on top of the well-dressed man's drink, causing him to lose his balance and spill his drink. As the man stumbled backward in pain, Tom released his grip on the man's hair, preparing to deliver a punch, but he realized the man was already out of range, landing on the floor before Tom could strike. He took a step towards him and recognized him. "Don't bother getting up," Tom said firmly. "I mean it." Pete, disheveled and soaked in his own drink, looked up from the floor and nodded, not uttering a word. Tom turned his attention back to Tanya. The entire table fell silent. He recognized several of the people there. They were part of Tanya's team and had been to their house for gatherings before. I guess loyalty to the team trumps everything, he thought, except for one person who had revealed the truth to him. He briefly considered finding out who it was, but quickly decided it wasn't worth pursuing. "I'm going home. If there's any chance of saving our marriage, you'll come home with me now," he said calmly. Tanya nodded and started to stand, but he raised his hand to stop her. "Give me a moment to leave peacefully." Before turning to leave, he cast a glance at Betty Wilson, seated next to Bob Thornton. "Betty, does Bill think you're in Boston too?" "Bob, is that what Alice believes?" They avoided eye contact, unable to answer his question. Is the whole team involved in this? He wondered. Sadly, he knew at least one of them was. The drive home was a blur. He was surprised to find himself in the driveway before he fully realized it. He let himself in, grabbed a drink from the fridge, and sat in the living room. Tom knew Bob and Alice. The other two couples were unfamiliar to him. In total, there were 4 couples involved. He considered calling Bob or Alice, but realized he didn't want to talk at the moment. He didn't know everything, but he felt like Bob and Alice were lying. Instead, he sent them a text. "Just heard from Tanya that travel plans seem to have changed. It's probably best to call and get an update." With that, they were aware that something was amiss, and they could decide whether or not to investigate. At least his conscience was clear. About 20 minutes later, he heard the garage door opening and Tanya's car pulling in. He waited in the living room as she entered, still dressed in her little black dress, though without the high heels and jewelry. She seemed calm as she walked into the living room and took a seat across from him on the sofa. He remained silent, waiting for her to speak. He knew that in any discussion, staying quiet could be a powerful tool. He was determined to let the silence hang as long as necessary. It didn't take long. Tanya seemed ready to burst. "It's not what you think," she began. He raised his hand, signaling for her to be quiet. "You have no idea what I'm thinking about what I saw tonight," Tom replied. "I don't need a big backstory. We're both engineers. And we know that there's no real or objective answer to any why question. It's usually just an excuse to justify bad choices. I won't ask why. Let's start with something simpler. How long has this been going on? How many people are involved? How often does our friends know about it, apart from the other cheaters at the table? Am I known as your betrayed partner among your colleagues and our friends?" "No, Tom, it's not like that at all," Tanya protested. "We, the team, our travel plans got messed up, and instead of coming home. I didn't see the whole team there. Where was everyone else?" Tom asked. "When we got the news, some of the team decided to stay home for one more night and meet us at the airport tomorrow," she admitted. "But you chose to lie to me," he said. "You seemed close with Pete. Is there something going on between the star engineer and the young program manager that you want to tell me?" "Well, for starters, Pete's just a colleague. Nothing inappropriate is happening. I should have told you about the change in travel plans, but it seemed trivial. Whether I was in town or in Boston didn't matter much. You weren't expecting me, and I wanted to support the team. All we did was grab a meal before going to our rooms. I didn't see any reason to mention it to you. You completely embarrassed me in front of my team." Her tone had grown defensive again, trying to bluff her way out. Tom took out his phone and showed her the text, sliding it across the coffee table towards her. The look on her face told him that she remembered the picture and the circumstances, and she couldn't deny it. She started again, but this time without the defensive facade. He took the phone back and started recording the conversation, keeping it in his shirt pocket. "Tom, our team," as she struggled for words. "Well, we're very close in many ways. Most of us," she began. "We have a little group that meets regularly. They were all at Bradley's. We've been working hard on the proposal, and you know how much time I've spent on it. I don't exactly remember how it started. It was sometime after Pete became the program manager. We worked closely together, and our feelings developed, and one thing led to another. Tanya explained. No why questions, Tom reminded her. Accidentally ending up in an affair doesn't just happen. There are conscious decisions involved, and we both know that. Don't insult me, please. The whole team, Tom began again, struggling to find a suitable term. You all. He left it hanging. Is this an ongoing thing with the team? She nodded once more. Pete claimed it was good for building trust and team dynamics. That's not fair to say, Tom. It's so much more than that. I feel a deep connection with Pete and the team, more than ever before. Tanya's bravado returned. He had a sinking feeling that this wasn't going to end well. Unfortunately, it seems like there might be some changes in your team, Tom said. What have you done? Tanya gasped. Tom, revealing this to anyone else will ruin more lives. Let them make their own choices. We need to face our issues together. Tanya, you have to understand that I can't stay silent and be complicit in all of this. I know Bob and Alice. Actually, I'm starting to like them a lot more than Betty and Bill right now, he added. I texted them saying that travel plans had changed. How they choose to respond and how their partners choose to react is up to them. I can't ignore what I've learned. Tom, we have the most productive team in the history of our company. She nearly shouted. And you benefited too. Just because we had team meetings on Wednesdays doesn't mean you missed out. I never rejected you. You always had access to me whenever you needed it. So now you're aware that you never experienced any of that. If you don't know about it, then it hasn't happened, right? Tom was speechless, listening to the extent of the deception and the depth of his ignorance. So now just because you know, just because your poor ego is bruised, you want to ruin all that me and my team have accomplished, Tanya hissed. She was furious and getting angrier. It was contagious. Tom felt his heart rate climbing as Tanya continued to defend her team's provocative dynamic. He was growing angrier as well. For a moment, just a moment during his drive home from Bradley's, he thought, if it was just this once with Pete, maybe he can forgive it. That thought had long since died a gruesome but swift death. He didn't need to hear anymore. He didn't want to hear anymore, but she went on. No, sir, we're not going to let you get away with it. You're going to text Bob and Alice back and let them know that you heard from me, and we were stuck in Atlanta, but have reservations for the morning. That's the story Betty and Bill are going to use, and you're going to back them up, so help me. She shouted. There are tens of millions riding on this deal, and your hurt feelings don't mean a thing. Send the text, then we can talk about how we manage going forward. Manage going forward, Tom shouted. There's no managing it going forward. You're leaving. Now, you and your sick team and your leader Pete can carry on as you want. We're done. I'll find an attorney this week and get it working. It's a simple 50-50 split. You keep your retirement, I'll keep mine, Tom said. But go. You have reservations in town. Use them. Head off to Boston and score another amazing win for you and your team. Tom, please send those texts, Tanya said in a much softer tone, pleading with me. If we lose Betty or Bill before the presentation, the company could lose millions. You and I, we could lose tens, maybe hundreds of thousands in commissions and bonuses. Just think of all the places we could go with that money. Just you and I, forget about this and reclaim my heart as yours. Please, Tom, don't let some undue concern about some random fling derail us. Pete says I'm on the fast track to executive status. All I have to do is keep producing like we do for a few more years. Don't you want that for me? For you? She asked. Tanya, just leave. He just managed to say, then he was hit hard in the back and the wind was knocked out of him as he continued to the floor with a knee in his back. Don't hurt him, Tanya said. Too badly, she added. So, the jury's still out on breaking my nose, huh? Pete said as he leaned down and put his face up next to mine as I lay pinned on the floor. Tanya must have a transmitter, Tom thought. So now I know whose team she's batting for. We'll see whose nose gets broken. Pete smiled. Get his darn phone and type the dumb text for him. We don't have time for this nonsense. Someone yanked him up from the floor. Only one person. He intentionally played hurt, making the guy behind him exert a lot of force to bring him to his feet. That gave him some needed intel. His captor was a weak office worker and was wheezing from the effort to get Tom to his feet. Tom was getting his breath back after being sandbagged and was getting his head back in the game. Unlike Pete and his team of well-groomed salespeople, Tom's team worked in the field with the 160th SOAR out of F.T. Campbell, Kai. Oh, his group of engineers weren't anywhere near their level, but in spending time with the crews while working test missions, the team were invited. to work off their Pillsbury Doughboy bellies under the guidance of some hardworking men that were flown to missions in the aircraft his team modified just for them. If these men showed up on your doorstep, it was because they were sent there and your days on Earth had come to an end. Tom and his team built the gadgets they needed to get into, and more importantly, out of some dangerous places. Tom's team took pride that their modifications helped accomplish the mission and brought everyone home. The guys from the 160th and their intimidating passengers were very appreciative of the hard work Tom's crew put in to make sure their gear worked, and the most intimidating guy in the group was MSGT Troy Baker. The MSGT was well known to those who lived in his world. Everyone from rookies to high-ranking officers showed him the respect he earned for guiding his men through missions all over the world. He was well known for having never left anyone behind. This reputation was solidified forever during a mission in Colombia. MSGT Baker told the young LT platoon leader to stick close. It was the LT's first mission, and MSGT Baker thought he was doing well for a rookie when the FARC opened up and caught their group in an ambush. They were able to fight them off, but then he looked over and saw the LT on the ground bleeding from a head wound. "He's gone, sir," the medic said, checking for signs of life. Baker kneeled down and lifted him onto his shoulders. "He's injured," the medic said again. "That may be," he replied, "but we're bringing him back with us." The medic looked at him like he was crazy. It was a long trek back to the landing zone through dense forest, and they were lucky if they made it through unscathed. Carrying a wounded person seemed impossible. The MSGT understood his thoughts. "I would do the same for you, Billy," he assured the medic. "Stay close in case I need your help." What happened next was unbelievable. When they arrived back at the base, the doctor met them as the helicopter landed. The medic explained that the lieutenant didn't make it. The doctor nodded and took out a pen light. The medic watched as the lieutenant's eyes reacted to the light. "Maybe you want to change your diagnosis, doctor?" the medic asked as they hurriedly rushed the lieutenant into surgery. MSGT Baker was a man who seemed timeless. He didn't say much, but when he did, everyone listened. He was a rarity in a world that favors things that are cheap and disposable. He was unique and valued, and he seemed to have a special connection with Tom and his team. During the downtime between missions, MSGT Baker expressed his gratitude by teaching Tom and the team some basic, effective self-defense techniques. He explained to the engineers that even though they were unlikely to encounter dangerous situations, it was still important to be prepared, just in case. "I know that the biggest threat you'll likely face is a malfunctioning copier or a nasty paper cut. But if you continue in this field, you might find yourself in some challenging situations," MSGT Baker said. "So at least now you'll have some useful skills to rely on if you encounter any trouble. Let's hope a paper cut is the scariest thing you ever have to deal with." Tom focused on controlling his breathing and leaned into his captor as if he was still restrained. He remembered the self-defense techniques MSGT Baker had taught them. There might be times when you feel helpless and can't do much, but even when you're being attacked, there are still ways to fight back. You just need to be smarter than your assailant, Tom recalled. He leaned back further into his captor, offering passive resistance and gradually sapping his captor's strength. "Give me your phone," Tom Pete said, staring him in the eyes. "Listen, I know that I hurt you emotionally by being involved with your wife. Tom, every guy on the team has been with her. Forget about trying to be tough, Tom. You're just a weak, naive guy. Do as we say, and maybe you'll still have the chance to be with Tonya when the rest of us are not with her. Don't forget about the bonuses she earns. You can buy all the toys you want with that money to ease the pain. Heck, maybe Tonya will even buy you a robot partner for those times when she's busy." Tom refrained from responding as Pete took pleasure in demeaning him and trying to gain control over him. "Where's your phone, Tom?" Pete asked, noticing the outline of the phone in Tom's shirt pocket. "Ah, there it is." He reached for it with his right hand. Tom quickly stomped his right heel down hard on Pete's shin. Pete yelped in pain, collapsing to the floor due to his injured foot. Tom broke free from Pete's hold and watched as his captor's eyes widened in recognition. He extended his right arm and executed a punch, following the technique taught by MSGT Baker, connecting forcefully with Pete's face. Bone broke under Tom's fist and blood began to gush from Pete's nose as he collapsed. Tom glanced back and saw Bill lying on the floor, crying and clutching his leg. "I think you broke my foot," Bill whimpered. Tom stomped down on Bill's foot, causing him to scream in pain. "That should remove any doubts," Tom stated. He returned his attention to Pete, who was on the ground, with both hands covering his injured face, struggling to rise to his knees. Tom approached him and leaned close to his ear. "Looks like you broke your nose, Pete." "I'm just not willing to sacrifice myself for the team," Tom said before delivering a powerful punch to Pete's temple, rendering him unconscious. With adrenaline coursing through his veins, Tom surveyed the living room, searching for Tanya. Suddenly, he felt a forceful blow to the back of his neck. He dropped to one knee and swiftly turned to face his new attacker. To his surprise, it was Tanya, holding a cast iron skillet. The blow only grazed him, and he rose to his feet, wrenching the skillet from her hand. "Tom, we can still salvage this," she pleaded. "Think of all the money you'll be throwing away. I promise to end all the affairs. I'll cut them off completely. It'll just be you and me again, like before." Tom massaged the back of his head with his left hand, looking at Tanya in astonishment as she transformed before his eyes, shifting personas like the alien in The Thing. He smiled at the realization. Tanya misinterpreted his smile as agreement to her plea and moved closer to hug Tom. He brought his left hand down from his neck to hold her back, and after a moment's contemplation, he raised his right hand and landed a forceful punch on her nose. It didn't knock her out, but it did break her nose. Tanya cried and slumped to the floor. "It hurts, doesn't it?" Tom asked, eyes watering, difficulty breathing, blood everywhere. "It works every time." "Why did you hit me?" she sobbed. "Because I could," Tom responded. His phone was still recording. While not everything was in his favor, he believed he had enough evidence to support his actions. He surveyed the room, remembering the advice MSGT Baker had given him. "Make your decision when you can act, and once you do, commit fully and don't stop until you're the only one standing." He looked around, realizing that aside from Bill whining in the corner and Tanya struggling to stop her bleeding nose, he was the only one still active. "You saved me once again, Top," he thought. "It looks like you and Bill won't be in any condition to participate on Monday," Tom declared. "What a stroke of bad luck, missing out on all those millions in bonuses. Oh well, I wonder how Art will react when he finds out." Tom considered calling 911 but hesitated, knowing that once the police arrived, he would lose the opportunity to question Tanya. He approached her, finding her sitting with a dish towel pressed against her face. He knelt beside her. "Pinch the bridge of your nose with your thumb and index finger." Like this, he demonstrated. The adrenaline surge subsided, and Tom suddenly felt drained of energy. He collapsed onto the floor across from Tanya. Where had his wife gone? The woman sitting across from him was not the same person he thought he knew, and he couldn't comprehend how she had deceived him for so long. "Was it all worth it?" he asked. Tanya looked at him and shook her head. "It might have been," she admitted. "If only you had gone along with it. We were so close. After Monday, I would have been on my way to the top. Now, this setback will hold me back. I can recover, but it's going to be a setback." "So VP was all you had in mind?" Tom inquired. "What about us? The cheating, the lying, would it just continue?" "Tom, you're so naive." Pete knew that. "He said your strict morals and idealistic views would hinder my progress." "Did he tell you that before or after he turned you into the team's plaything?" Tom questioned. "As if you have any idea," she retorted with contempt. "Oh, I tried to be the perfect engineer and follow all your advice to boost my career. Do you want to know what actually works?" Tom remained silent, realizing that sometimes it's best to just step aside when someone is about to self-destruct. His phone was still recording. "Well, let me tell you, my dear husband, all your advice didn't work. I worked tirelessly, making sure all my assignments were completed on time and within budget, but all I received were some empty compliments. It wasn't until Betty pulled me aside that I learned what really mattered for a woman to get ahead. So this has been happening even before Pete came along." Tom questioned with disbelief. "Oh, you can be so slow sometimes, Tom." Despite your intelligence as an engineer, she scoffed. "It was at the Cramerica Christmas party the year after I joined that I first engaged with Art. And I haven't looked back since." "Wait, you're even sleeping with the boss? Art? Art Vandelay?" Tom exclaimed. "Yes, Tom, Art, Pete, Bill, anyone on the team who could help further my career. Right now, he's gathering the rest of the team. They'll come up with a cover story for our absence. They'll have to make the pitch without us, but I believe the extra effort we put into building relationships with the purchasing managers will pay off." "If everything was going smoothly, why all this aggression?" Tom asked. "That was Pete's idea." The idiot. "I told him to calm down, that I would come home and fix things, but he had to go all macho. Look at what that got us. Instead of me being the face of the winning team, I'm back to getting Art's approval." Like I said, it's fixable, but it will set me back. You wouldn't have bought me so easily, he said. Maybe not, Tanya replied, but I still would have made the flight. Well, you definitely won't be making that flight now, he said. Remembering how Pete seemed so informed, he figured that Tanya had to have a transmitter with her. Art, are you listening? I'm about to call the authorities. I'm sure there's a handful of crimes involved here, and we haven't even begun to discuss the trail of deceit. That's a government contract, right, Tanya? Tom asked rhetorically. Yeah, the government takes a dim view of how, did you say extra effort? I'm sure you have great lawyers and all, Art, but maybe there's another way? He suggested. A moment later, Tanya's cell phone rang. Hail to the chief, Art? She asked into the phone. Of course. I'll put you on speaker. Tom? Art's voice came through the speaker. First, let me apologize to you. Pete's actions were a huge mistake. I can assure you the board will deal with him firmly. Thank you, Art. That's a relief. Glad to see that you and the board take assault and deceit seriously. Tom, these are all unfortunate accusations. Lawyers will make a fortune, but no one wants to cause a stir. We may pay a fine, Pete and Bill can do some community service, but in the end, you will be divorced and lose a lot of money. Art explained in a business-like manner. Do I hear an or in all of this, Art? Tom asked. Tanya always said you were smarter than her. Still, I'm glad I hired Tanya. Yes, Tom, there most definitely is an or, Art continued. Tom, we, Kramerica, have taken your wife's affections away from you, and when you discovered this and questioned it, you were treated poorly. Very poorly. Shocking. Tom interjected. Tom, Art continued. Instead of calling the authorities as you suggested, what if we could come to an agreement? I just sent a snippet to Tanya's phone. Well, not me, one of my tech guys here. They tell me that it disappears after viewing. Take a look. Maybe that might restore some goodwill. Tanya opened the snippet and turned the phone to Tom. He saw the words Bank of Grand Cayman and a number. A very large number. And when will that be deposited? Tom asked. It's already there, Tom. You have an email with the account number. This has been a very bad day for you, Tom. This might be a difficult decision for you to make, and I don't discount the emotion. Tanya is an attractive woman, I understand that. But ultimately, one can't take emotion to the bank, can they? One cannot. Tom agreed, mimicking Art's posh way of speaking. Kramerica will cover the costs of your divorce. You two will never reconcile, we all know that. Tanya will file the papers. She will ask for her personal belongings and her retirement. He thought for a moment before replying. On one hand, he could stand up for what he believed in and expose the entire sordid situation. On the other hand, he could just walk away. Art had just given him 5 million reasons to do just that. Does Kramerica have medical professionals, Art? Tom asked. Well, yes, Tom, I believe we have some doctors on call, Art replied. Good, Tom said. You better send some over to pick up your team. Are we in agreement then? Art asked. Tanya, who Tom responded. Exactly. Art agreed. Are we finished, Tom? Art asked. Goodbye, Art, Tom said, and ended the call. Tom put away his phone and turned off the recording app, slipping it back into his pocket. I knew you would see it my way, Tom. We can still be friends, supportive friends, when this is all over. She tried to give him her most charming smile, but even with her damaged nose, it couldn't change the fact that her eyes were turning black and there was dried blood on her face. Tom found the sight amusing and allowed himself a smile. Once again, Tanya misread his smile as agreement and leaned in for a hug. Tom used his right hand to stop her. He gently held her face and pushed her back until she fell onto the couch. I must have hit you too hard or not hard enough. In what world would I want to hug you, Tanya? She looked up at him, feeling hurt. Take whatever you want, but have it out of here by tomorrow, Tom said and walked towards the door. He stopped next to Bill. Still in pain? He asked. Yes, of course, you jerk. It still hurts, Bill complained. Maybe this will distract you from it, Tom said and kicked Bill. Bill doubled over in pain and groaned. Tom walked out. He got into his car without knowing where he was going, but he knew he needed food and shelter. He grabbed a burger from a takeout place and checked into a Red Roof Inn just outside of town near the highway before falling asleep as soon as his head hit the pillow. Despite the pain and bruises covering his body, he woke up early the next morning and dragged his sore body out of bed. He made motel room coffee and checked his phone when it beeped. It was a text from the number. He opened it immediately. Sorry about yesterday. I can meet. TGIF at the mall, around noon. I'll wave you over to seats at the bar. I'll be there. He texted back and poured the lukewarm coffee into a paper cup. Yep, I'll be there, he thought as he set up his laptop. Time for some online banking. Back in college, long before Tonya came into his life, Tom had an economics professor who recommended having an offshore account as a safety net. He had nothing to lose, so with his professor's guidance, he opened a new bank account in, coincidentally, the Cayman Islands. He called it his Screw You Fund. He had started the account 10 years prior and added to it whenever possible. He was proud to have close to $50,000 in the account. Well, his Screw You Fund was about to receive a major financial boost. Tom accessed the secure website for each bank. With his passcode and a few keystrokes, he transferred the majority of the funds from Cramerica's payment into his personal account. He left $100,000 in the original account. He then took a shower, changed, and got ready to head out to meet the mysterious texter. Tom entered TGIF just after noon. As he made his way inside, he spotted a man waving him over. The man appeared to be around Tom's age, good-looking, and well-dressed. Tom walked towards him. I believe you sent me a text, Tom said as he sat down. I'm sorry for how things turned out. I don't know if there was a clean way to tell you. The stranger began. Why don't you start by telling me who you are and your connection to Tonya? Tom replied. I used to be on the team. I left the Army after 8 years. I got injured in combat and had a long recovery before being discharged. I joined Cramerica about 6 months ago. I was assigned to Pete's team about 3 months ago. I was talking to a friend about the job and mentioned Tonya. When he asked for her full name, we discovered we had a mutual friend, and he asked me to look out for Tonya as a favor. I called our mutual friend back and told him about Tonya's advances. He told me about you and that he thought there was more to the story than Tonya let on. He thought that her pimping herself for money seemed out of character for the man he knew. He believed there was something you needed to know. Let's just say I didn't agree with their methods. I guess I'm more of a straight shooter. I resigned yesterday and sent you the text. Our mutual friend? Tom asked. Troy Baker. If it weren't for Troy, he paused for a moment before continuing. Let's just say he helped me out when I was in a tough spot as a young lieutenant. I owe him a favor or two. Don't we both? Tom agreed. What do you plan on doing? The stranger asked. Art kind of laid it all out for me. I could get the authorities involved, and yes, Bill and Pete, and even Tonya would have some legal issues, but with his lawyers, it would all end up as a minor obstacle. We made an agreement. You might think I'm compromising, and maybe you're right in a way. But they took the only thing I had that was invaluable. If I can't make them pay legally, well, at least I can make them suffer consequences. It won't bring Tonya back, but I think I may find she's less irreplaceable than I thought. I have a trip planned. Tell Troy thanks for everything. I won't be going back to work. What about you? Tom asked finally. Well, Troy always spoke highly of Baxter Inc. Now that you're gone, they may just need another engineer. I think you'll find they do business a bit differently at Baxter. Maybe more to your liking. Challenging, but the perks won't compare to what Tonya's team was offering. Tom smiled. I think I can live with that. The stranger rose. Tom did likewise. They simply nodded to each other and left without a further word. On Monday, Tom had just checked in for his flight to Costa Rica. Tamarindo will be a nice place to relax for a while, he thought. He was making his way toward security and saw a mailbox just up ahead. He reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope addressed to the DOJ, Washington, D.C. Inside was a thumb drive of the recording. They might be interested. Who knows? He thought. Maybe Art's lawyers aren't as good as he thinks. He dropped the envelope in the box and walked into the security line. Epilogue 9 months later, Tom sat at his usual table in the cafe. Anna, lovely as always, brought him his drink. Thank you, dear, he said, and he raised the bottle to his lips. He had received mail. He was still holding the envelope. No return address. He wondered who had found him. He wasn't going through elaborate steps to stay hidden, but finding him in a little town on the Pacific coast of northern Costa Rica would have taken some resources not available to the ordinary guy. His first thought was Art's people had found him. He had let it sit at his house for 2 days. He was fairly certain it wasn't a bomb, yet you can't be too careful. Carlos, Tom called out to the owner of the cafe. Do you have your knife? Yes, mister. Tom came the acknowledgement, his voice steady but with an underlying note of anticipation. Tom handed over the meticulously sealed envelope and stepped back a few paces, his movements calculated and deliberate. Can never be too careful, he thought, his eyes narrowing slightly as he observed Carlos carefully slice open the envelope with a small, silver letter opener. The air was thick with tension, a silent testament to the gravity of the contents within. Carlos, with a practiced hand, extracted the contents and handed them over to Tom, who thanked him with a nod of appreciation. Tom took another sip from his drink, the ice clinking softly against the glass, a stark contrast to the silence that enveloped them. He turned the envelope over, his fingers deft and sure as he did so. Several sheets of thick paper cascaded onto the table with a soft flutter, each carrying the weight of secrets untold. He picked up the topmost note, its edges crisp and unblemished. Thought you would find this interesting. Read the message, the handwriting neat and impersonal. That was all the note said, and instead of a signature, there was a phone number. Not just any number, but the one that could unravel mysteries and tie loose ends. Troy would have the resources to find him, he thought, his mind already racing through possibilities. I can live with that decision, he concluded, a sense of resolve firming within him. Curiosity piqued, he flipped over another piece of paper, revealing it to be a copy of a newspaper article, the fold lines sharp and defined. The photo accompanying the article was unmistakably damning. It showed Pete, Bill, Tanya, and Betty, a quartet of figures caught in a moment of defeat, being led out of the iconic Comerica building in handcuffs. Their expressions ranged from disbelief to resigned acceptance, a tableau of fallen ambition. The headline for the article was as sensational as it was accusatory: 4 indicted in multi-million-dollar fraud. A smile, tinged with a mixture of satisfaction and vindication, spread across Tom's lips. Maybe Art's lawyers aren't everything he thought they were, he mused aloud, the words breaking the silence with an almost palpable sense of schadenfreude. Speaking to himself had become a habit, one born out of necessity since his Spanish was weak and English wasn't widely spoken in his current locale. He found comfort in the familiar cadence of his own language, a balm for the solitude that often accompanied his endeavors. It was like a thread connecting him to a life that seemed increasingly distant, a life where conversations flowed freely and understanding was a given. He liked to hear English conversation, even if it was just him talking to himself, a soliloquy in a land where such sounds were foreign. Anna, another drink please, as he held up his empty bottle. Yes, mister. Tom, thank you, Anna, he said as he accepted his drink, took a sip and he looked out at the deep blue Pacific. Tanya who?